in little pieces so I can put it on the EDU site. So it will be on the internet. And hopefully we can get all the information you need and talk about it. For now, though, I got to collect your field trip packets and tell you about the after-school environmental films and the wanted posters. So, tonight I'm showing a movie called Winged Migration. Has anyone seen it? You should know that it's like the boringest movie ever. It really is the boringest movie ever. Now, I show it because I like to do a different, I like to do a spectrum of movies. And Winged Migration is for nature nerds. That's it. Maybe if you're into cinematography. The movie was shot using like hot air balloons and hang gliders and ultralights.
How long ago?
No, I mean, you should know, like, if you guys are interested in filmmaking, you should Google the making of Winged Migration. It had, like, the most hours of footage reduced to the least amount of final film. So they had, like, 7 years of footage shot by a team of, like, 250 cameramen around the world.
70 years?
7-0. Like, I don't know if it adds up to 7 years of hours, but I mean to say that they had like piles and piles and piles of reel, and all it is birds doing this, and you can hear the birds breathing, and that's like the whole movie. There's like this weird French guy that narrates, and he's got like a comical French guy accent. Like, it's seriously like pushing joke. The movie is weird. Like, it's just birds flying. The thing is, like, it gets you into this contemplative, meditative state. I have a friend who used to watch Winged Migration to go to sleep every night because she has like a really painful condition. And so she like takes gnarly pain medicines and she lives in this like haze of suffering. And she says that the movie just sort of chills her out and lets her go to sleep. It's like the only way she can sleep. So she's seen it like every night of her life for the last like 30 years. It's a weird movie. Like, it's slow, it's contemplative, but the footage is like blow your mind footage. That's all I can say. Like, I make you no promises. If you get bored easily, don't complain tomorrow that it was boring, because I warned you. But if you like nature and you like birds and you like cinematography, it's an awesome movie. I think it's actually 2 hours of birds flying. So don't say I didn't warn you. Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Anybody know? You remember how long it was?
I only remember small bits of the movie. Like, there's a factory scene.
Yep.
The part where a bird gets run over by like a grass cutter.
Let's not give it all away. But did you remember it the way I describe it?
Yeah.
Slow pace, beautiful footage. That's about it.
I remember sitting with my parents and like watching it. And I think I might have. I don't know if I fell asleep, but I think my sister did. But yeah, I remember watching it.
I mean, like, honestly, the nature footage is one of a kind.
Yeah. Like,
truly one of a kind. The movie won all kinds of awards, and like people who made it got famous. And it's boring as F. Anybody else want to talk more about this? Watch me. Take your packet. Keep your bus ticket. This will get you on the bus. And then pass the rest to Jesse while you take out your notes. Pass the rest to Jesse while you take out your notes.
One with the middle one?
You keep the middle. It's okay. They don't have to. We're going to separate them anyway. Just keep them together. But you don't have to staple them again.
Put it somewhere.
And pass those 2 to Jesse. Pass those 2 to Jesse. Pass those 2 to Jesse. Pass those 2 to Jesse.
Don't lose it. Right? Can't get on the bus. I need.
Yeah, you won't get on the bus without this.
What's happening?
What happens if you miss a field goal? Do you miss a lot of like?
Well, I have to. I did 5 have to.
We all take turns stabbing a voodoo doll.
Mary, do you want to go to the movie? I don't know. It's really roller coaster. Yeah. Like might go, but like I'd do it if we didn't have to do anything. And I
It's such a good idea.
Sometimes it's flushy.
You can have a plate too.
Let's go explore.
See if I got a bus.
Okay.
Oh, I'm from Florida.
Okay. Now, and you know that's not one of my breakfast burritos. That's one of my lunch burritos that I buy over here. Okay. All right.
Where do you buy them?
Just to make sure you know that it's.
I buy bean rice cheese burritos at La Tapatia Bakery.
Yeah.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
favorite.
They're like $3.50 at lunch.
Pretty delicious.
Are they still $3.50?
I don't know. I don't know.
You gotta get. You know. You
I get them like
have
after
BRC now. You have BRC. Why don't you get like carnitas or something?
It doesn't freeze as well, and I don't like to eat a lot of commercial food.
That's probably a good call, but man, it's delicious. Oh man, you got a badass knife. Sweet. Where'd you get that?
Amazon.com, where I get everything.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, dude, I want a badass. Like, as long as you're careful, there's no problem with it. People will freak out.
I try not to stab myself while making it. All right, children. All right, children. Do not evolve into primordial soup. We got to catch up with the work. I got to remind you, please don't lose your bus ticket. I cannot let you on the bus if you don't prove your teachers are okay with you going. You realize that your lack of attention earlier is slowing down the whole class, bro? You can just tear that whole page out. The whole page. The whole page.
What?
So did we talk about the rainforest yesterday? Did we talk about the rivers with the big-ass fish?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, we saw that guy.
Did we talk about seasonal forest?
I think so.
Monsoon
Talks
forest?
about the fig that's like super badass.
We stopped at the tropical savannah.
Okay.
Like we went through it.
We went through it though?
Where's the elephants?
Oh, yeah. Ivory.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
If we talked about the recent spike in poaching,
Yeah. Right where we
the only thing I have to add about the savannah is a cool little nature fact for those of you that are nerds like me. You should try to Google cheetah running video and then play it on slow motion if your browser will let you do that. Because when cheetahs run, their entire body is like an extremely powerful slinky. You know that they're the most powerful and the fastest land animal? I guess they're not the most powerful, they're the fastest land animal. What's totally mind-boggling is if you watch them run in slow motion, their head doesn't move up and down at all. So their whole body will be going like this, and their head's like...
So stable, like, let's see.
So they are the inspiration for motion-canceling cameras.
Chickens do that too. Just
Yeah, there's actually a lot of animals. Frogs do that. If you put a frog on your hand and you rotate your hand, the frog's head won't turn.
yeah.
It's true of many animals, but the crazy thing about cheetahs is they do it really fast. And they actually expend a lot of energy, canceling all their body's motion with their neck so that the head stays in a perfect line. That way they never take their eyes off the prey. It's pretty cool. Remember that the biggest impact is probably the poaching rise. And if we could irrigate it, we would. So to some degree, ranching, farming have been a problem with the Spanish.
Two breeders today.
Our last terrestrial biome is desert. And desert is also the largest terrestrial biome. With global warming, it seems to be growing, by the way. The deserts are expanding. All deserts tend to be on the inside of a continent. They tend to be behind a rain shadow. So oncoming moist air leaves the rain in the mountains, and then on the backside of the mountains you get what's called a rain shadow. And you all think of this when I say desert, but you should know that sand dunes are actually very rare. Almost all deserts are vegetated. To prevent confusion, remember that the big deal is not how dry they are. As a matter of fact, we are usually drier than deserts. The big deal is the extreme temperature swings. I think I told you a story that I woke up in the desert with my gallon bottle frozen solid, and by noon it was over 100 degrees. That represents about 7 degrees of temperature change over about 5 hours, which is what, like 14 degrees per hour? That's a lot. The daytime, because it's so hot and because there's so little shade and because it's warming or cooling so quickly, is hostile. So almost everything in the desert is nocturnal. I've done some backpacking in the desert, and after a couple of days trying to walk around in the sun, you end up switching and humans become nocturnal. Anybody know what the Pacific Crest Trail is? It's a big long trail that lets you walk from Mexico to Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you walk this section, almost everyone walks that as a nocturnal animal. Then you switch to a diurnal animal as you enter the Sierras. I've done that. You sleep from about 10 in the morning until about 5 at night. Because it's hot and gnarly, and that way you don't have to carry a big old sleeping bag. So you just like chill in the desert with like a little cotton rag over you. And then at night, before sunset, 5 or so, you cook up some breakfast dinner. Hit the trail as the sun sets, walk all night. It is cranking with life.
That sounds kind of scary.
It's amazing how much stuff you'll see at night. There's snakes and spiders and scorpions, all the stuff that you're afraid of.
They're no big fans.
But you see the coyotes and the javelias and all the birds and the bugs, and it's amazing. Like, the desert at night is pretty much like the forest in the daytime. It's just fire.
How does that trail handle like border crossing between Mexico and Canada?
Technically, you start at the Mexican border.
Okay. And
so some people will go to the hassle of like getting a stamp and going across the border. I think it's an agua dulce, but I don't really.
Well, most people would just stay in America the whole time.
Literally, people will touch the fence.
Right.
Like fence to fence.
Wow.
Everybody knows about the water storage. That's a really big deal. There's really no competition for light. It's not like it's a struggle to pack yourself in among all the other stuff in the desert. And you guys remember this issue. What's left behind when salt water evaporates?
Salt.
Because salt does not evaporate, the salt stays behind, and all water is a little salty. I'm not talking knackle. This isn't sodium chloride table salt. I'm talking salts as the generic dissolved nutrients in water. So runoff will wash the mountains, and the water will evaporate, and the salt will be left behind, and this happens every time it rains, a little bit of salt. Shut up over there. Geez, not all about you, okay? Just kidding. Even rainwater has a teeny little bit of salt in it. We're talking really small amounts, like a millionth of the salt concentration of the ocean. But you know, a little bit of salt water every time it rains. Salt is left behind, water evaporates. You know, after 10,000 or 100,000 or a million days of evaporating water, it adds up. So you get that soil, that salty crust we were talking about. So this type of this type of sand, desert like this, not really common. A common misconception. Everybody thinks of the desert as sand dunes, but probably 10% or less of the world's desert are in sand dunes.
So are salt flats just you saying evaporated water with salt everywhere?
Precisely. Anybody know the difference between a lake and a sea?
The salt. And there's not a lot of salt in the lake.
Sea has salt, true. But why? Why do lakes not have salt?
Because they're running.
Lakes have an outlet. All water is a little bit salty. In a lake, slightly salty coming in, slightly salty going out, we still call it fresh water. Slightly salty. But in a sea or in an ocean, the water has no place else to go. So that little bit of salt adds to the little bit of salt from yesterday, adds to the little bit of salt from the day before, and you accumulate salt. The ocean is only salty because water has evaporated from the ocean for the last gajillion years, and the salt's been left behind. Every time the water evaporates, the ocean gets a little bit salty.
So why are there some oceans or some seas that are more salty than others?
Oh, they just have either more salt in the runoff, or they're older, or they're in the tropics, so they have more evaporation. But you guys know, like, the Salton Sea in Southern California?
Yeah.
It's really salty, and it's a sea, and that's the right name. You guys know Mono Lake?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lake, it's a sea. That's why it's salty. You guys know Great Salt Lake? That's not a lake either, because of the stupid name that don't make no sense. Great Salt Lake. That's like saying...
Oxymoron.
Yeah, exactly. It is precisely an oxymoron. It's like saying that freshwater ocean over there. A salt flat is what happens when so much water has evaporated that all you get is salt.
And so when there is a little bit of rain, why does it create that like reflection?
Because it got wet, fool.
But okay, never mind.
Yeah, because that salt is dissolving into water, and so that they get... I mean, if we're talking about the same thing,
Yeah.
it looks reflective because there's water on it.
You said it keeps the ocean keeps evaporating water, leaving salt behind, making it salty. But like, that would mean that every time it's just the ocean is getting getting what do you like it?
That's what he said. Yes.
If the water keeps evaporating and the salt keeps getting left behind, that like sounds like a system where like you eventually run out of water. So like,
Yeah, the water is going to evaporate and come back.
right? But when it comes back, like, why does the ocean get more and more salty? The same water is just recycling.
Think of it as a part of the rock cycle. So rock gets broken up by erosion and gets fused again someplace else. Salt is a type of rock.
Okay.
So maybe that'll work. You're breaking up rock someplace, and the dissolved rock is piling up somewhere else. So the same way that mountains dissolve to make sandy beaches that will later become mountains again. Salt deposits will eventually desiccate. I don't know how it works, but somehow it
Yeah.
moves into the rock cycle, and later on it'll dissolve again. All right, so if it's not like that, I want you to think of deserts like this. Almost all deserts are like this.
Yeah, this is more a real desert.
And the funny thing is, this would be sand dunes if it wasn't for that crust of salt that develops when the water evaporates from the surface. See, there's all these plants in the desert. And it's all because of that stuff right there. That's your biological soil crust that you were all asking me about earlier. There are many types, so you should know that people refer to it as all of those different names and a million other names. But the principle is simple. You guys know that salt crystallizes, right? So between the grains of sand, when the water evaporates, the salt crystal creates little tiny air gaps, like a sponge. Anybody ever seen those green sponges that you arrange flowers into?
Yeah.
That's the consistency of this stuff. It's extremely light, it's kind of brittle, and because it's salt crystal, you can just push your finger into it until it wears off, until it just powders and goes away. You should note that crust like that takes thousands of years to develop. There's a place in the desert where you can see these two ruts in the sand with footprints on the side. Those are the tracks left in the salt crust by the wagon train during the westward expansion. People have studied the prints, and they know the family because the prints are still so clear. They're like, oh, the heavyset guy got hurt here because you can see his steps got closer together. And oh, the woman had a limp, but it looks like it's getting better, so maybe she's had a big rest or something. And they're like, oh, they lost one of their children. You can see that the tracks have disappeared for the child.
Okay.
And the tracks are that clear. You can track them and tell like how heavy they were, and like, oh, they're putting a lot of weight on the outside of their feet, so whatever. Those are like 200-300-year-old tracks. And you can see them just fine. No big deal. You can see 100-year-old tracks from the first tank. It was tested in the desert before we deployed them in World War I. And you can still see like the tracks, and you can see the footprints from the guy that was walking next to it taking notes on the pegboard or something. Once this crust breaks, you're back to sand dunes. But while the crust is there, think about it. Foamy, so it's going to absorb water. Nutrient cycling, bacteria lives there, mold lives there. So you get the beginnings of the soil ecosystem, even though you're just living in sand in the middle of the desert. I mean, sand dunes, that doesn't sound like a good place to grow your plants that are going to feed your animals and all that stuff, because it's just sand. But sand dunes with a little insulating foam crust on top, now we're talking. Seeds fall into there, they can sprout, they can cycle nutrients, there's decomposition there. Now we're talking. That biological soil crust is the secret, and we never think about that. So we take our motorcycles and our ATVs and our four-wheel drive trucks and we thrash the desert. And that desert will never recover. When you leave that print, it's just like no longer desert, now it's just sand dunes. So one of the really big deals with conservation in the desert is managing traffic. You guys know I'm a rock climber, right? One of the places I really like to climb is in the desert. Actually, many of the places I like to climb are in the desert. And climber foot traffic is probably the single biggest problem in desert conservation wherever there's climbing. Like pooping out in the desert, kind of an issue. Garbage, kind of an issue. Dogs running around, pollution. But tracks are the big problem. Because that crust is about as strong as that foamy stuff for planting flowers. You'll notice I've put a lot of photographs of mountains in here. Because the desert is usually the basin behind a rain shadow. Like the Western Sierras gets all of the rain, and the Eastern Sierras, the Owens Valley, is very dry. Have you guys noticed that? Like when you drive up to Mammoth, you're driving through the Owens Desert. If you drive to the Western Sierras at that latitude, it's just forest the whole way. Because the west side gets the rain, and the desert is in the rain shadow. Anybody know what cactus is? Oh, sorry, yeah.
I have a question. So about the sand dunes. So you're saying that they don't have that like little layer of
Yeah.
salt behind. Why is that?
Because the sand is moving. Sand dunes are, if you speed it up a little tiny bit, it's an ocean. There's like swell, and they crest, and they blow offshore. It's pretty rad. People have done like time-lapse footage of sand dunes, and it literally like looks like the ocean. Sand dunes are mobile; they're not standing still. They move just a little slower than we do. So we're like, oh, the sand dune's been here. But you come back tomorrow, and the crest of the sand dune has moved like 3 feet. So as the water hits and evaporates, you need a really long break in the wind to get enough crust to trap the sand. Usually it's on a geological time scale where wind patterns shift, and so then your sand dunes will like settle into flat, get the crust, and then they'll start growing the plants and stuff. Anybody know why cactus has spines?
Doesn't want to be eaten. Oh, maybe there will be one up on the tree.
Spines are usually in a cluster like this, so they catch dew, aggregate it into a big water droplet that drips right to where the roots are. Cacti water themselves. They drink about twice as much water as you can get from rain alone, because they take it out of the air. That's cool, right?
That is cool.
Coincidentally, it also helps protect the plant from predators. But I think that the watering thing is way neater than the predator thing. One of the weird nocturnal animals that's coincidentally never out during the day, so I don't know how they got the picture. Nocturnal animal. Nocturnal animal. And believe it or not, that's also a nocturnal
What the
animal.
hell is that?
I hate it.
It's called
Don't. No, that's just.
You're an animal racist.
No.
Why you gotta hate?
Don't like the
It's like
spiders and
weird.
bugs and big legs.
It's like weird.
It's like
I think
a
white people are
bubble.
weird. Is that cool?
So what's the deal?
That's a honey ant, and it's storing water because obviously it lives in the desert, and water storage is a challenge.
That's so nasty.
So this is the insect version of
Oh no.
this guy.
Oh my god, I hate that word.
Oh wait,
Not
that's cute.
cute.
That's cute.
That is not cute at all.
That's cute. That's
Tell me what you love, though. Tell me what you love, though. I love.
My dog?
Dogs are cute.
Just my dog, though.
You love that. That's awesome.
I'm never
Wait, are
going
those spines for protection or are those little
I'm never going to the desert.
We're going to Mexico this year.
Oh god.
So of course.
Where is ours?
So of course. The thorny devil has spines for protection, but it does the cactus thing.
How does it work?
They're active all night, and after a busy night partying in the Australian desert, they assume the position and they collect the dew at sunrise. And when they pick up their tail, it starts to bead and run down these two gutters on either side of the body,
Jeez.
which terminate at little pockets right behind the cheek. Then they stick their tongue out and go lick, lick, and then they go to sleep for the day.
That's so
How cool is that?
That's unbelievable.
I mean, like, that's exactly the cool thing about nature is you would never have invented this. You're all smart and spectacular, but we just can't make stuff as cool as just it happens on its own. We don't dominate it because we don't like it there.
Yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. Temperate shrubland all the way.
Exactly.
Temperate shrubland.
All right. What do you call land that gets wet sometimes? Wetland is a really big category because there's a lot of different types of land that get wet sometimes.
Like England.
Um,
All
swamps, marshes, bogs, whatever. All different sorts. Before we go any further, I'd like to try an experiment. Remember that a watershed is also known as a drainage basin. All the water that comes off the mountains that spills to one drain is called a watershed. And at the bottom, where all that water has to slow down, we're going to put together a bunch of stuff we've talked about so far. So wetland, drainage, common outlet. Fast-moving water can carry
salt. Nutrients.
But if the water's moving really fast, it can carry debris, big heavy debris like
Trees.
and your mom. But as the water slows down, what happens?
Just little things carry it.
Your mom settles down, then the cars settle down, then the trees settle
Then the
down,
cars.
then the boulders, then the rocks, then the pebbles. And when the water is perfectly still, then the really fine, little, silty miscellany, right?
Miscellaneous.
So whenever you see a wetland like this, you got to remember that this is where the water's slowing down and we've reached the land that gets wet, where the water stays. So because the water stays, this is delivering all that stuff from your whole watershed. So the bird pooped uphill, the bird poop washes away, and while the water's moving, that bird poop is just dissolving and tumbling and dissolving and tumbling into little tiny bits of bird poop dust. And when that water settles, bird poop sediment.
Good fertilizer.
Or if Alessio's talking too much and we throw him into the mountains, then he'll get tumbled down the river, and then little bits of Alessio will settle. You'll notice that water's not terribly deep. So the light is going there, the water is warm, it's full of nutrients. And did I mention there's water there? That's a perfect mix for plant life. You know, you're delivering fertilizer in the water to a well-lit environment. So wetlands are hyper-productive. Plants can't really grow much better. When this was all the wetland, there's a reason that the Mexican settlers grew their corn here. That's why the street is called Milpas. Because milpa is a type of agriculture where you grow corn in wetlands. And there's a reason they grew the corn in the wetlands because, you know, it's hyper-productive. There's fertilizer there. Don't forget that wetlands are dynamic. These are some of the most dynamic systems on the planet. Because they're hot one minute, then they're cold. They're salty, then they're fresh. They're clear, then they're murky. They're deep water, then they're shallow water. Because, you know, fresh water is rhythmic. Right after the wet season, you've got maximum nutrients. At the end of the dry season, you might be looking at dry land. During during a storm, there's muddy, murky, cold water. As the river flow slows down, the water gets clear and shallow and warmer. So all the variables change. These are dynamic systems. Salinity changes, clarity changes, temperature changes, depth changes. So even a simple pond in the middle of Oklahoma, that's a wetland. And that estuary where the river lets out, this is in Argentina actually, in the Argentinian Patagonia. Yeah, that's a river going out to the sea. That's a wetland. This is a cypress swamp in the southern United States. Imagine that environment. Alligator can't swim through there eating little fish, so that's a really good place for the big fish to lay its eggs, right? Those little tiny babies will have shelter, they'll have food, they'll be eating all the bugs that are eating all the algae that are growing in all the nutrients. Pretty good combo. So we call this the nursery effect. Fish from all over the world swarm to the mangrove forest during flood season. Because during flood season, that water is up to that dude's neck. And imagine little tiny fish hiding in all of those little teepees of roots. And there's birds walking through trying to get the little fish. And there's all these bugs eating all that plant stuff. So the little fish are growing and the big fish are trying to get the little fish. Ha! 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 Okay. Come back. You gotta laugh at me some more. That's your bus ticket.
Thank you.
Enjoy your relaxation, bro. I could stay home for a week.
I turned that part in.
What?
I turned that.
I know, that's okay. I'll give it to you tomorrow because I didn't tell anybody here. Remind me tomorrow.
Alright, cool.
Is it horrible? Are you suffering? Or are you like,
No, but
what's that?
I mean, I'm falling behind and everything.
Yeah, right. It's a tough break. So imagine if a person's like smart enough to care about school, they suffer. So we punish the kids that care about their academic performance by keeping them at home. But then the kid who doesn't give a crap about his academic performance is probably the most reckless behaviorally, and we just give them a day off. The nursery effect is based on the hyperproductive but hyper-sheltered environment. Do you guys know that mangroves make snorkels? So a big tree will sprout these little trees, and those little trees will poke out of the water to help it suck air down for the roots. It's trippy, right? They make snorkels. Their roots literally breathe air like all the other roots. They just together to snorkel. So these are snorkel leaves. The ones that don't have any leaves on them. You know, like something like this, to you and me, it's just like, shallow water, whatever. But biologically, this is cranking. Sunlight is hitting the bottom, the temperature's changing, there's enough oxygen exchange so that everything can grow. I mean, this is like firing ecologically. There's one other thing I want you to think about, and in order to discuss this, I have to give you an analogy, and I'm hoping that you've watched your butler do the dishes or something. I pick up all the plates, put them in the sink, plug the sink, fill it with water, add a little soap, grab my sponge, do the dishes. Rinse them on this side of the sink, put them in the rack to dry. I have my sink on the right full of soapy water with like chunks and leftover rice and whatever crap was scraped off the plates, right? Now I want you to imagine two possibilities, because this is actually going to be really important in a second, so focus on this. Two possibilities. Possibility number one, I pull the plug and let the water drain. It goes, it's gone. But now imagine possibility number 2. As soon as I pull the plug, I take my sponge and I put it into the drain. What will be different?
You filter out the bad stuff.
Yeah, all the chunks will stay, filtering the water a little bit, right?
Go slower.
It'll go slower. That's absolutely true. What else?
Sponge gets really dirty, like full of.
The sponge gets really dirty. What happens if I leave that sponge in that spot in the sink overnight?
It's moldy and gross.
Biological funk. Anybody know what else will happen with that sponge? Won't it eventually dry out? But the water will drip out really slowly, right? At night, you might hear like a drip as the water drains from the sponge, right? Okay, so here we go. Remember that I told you already that they're called drainage basins. And you know that in many parts of the world, we don't call it a sink, we call it a basin, like a wash basin or a bathroom basin. There's a very good reason for this terminology. It works the same way. A wetland is like a sponge. It slows the flow, filters the water, trickles it out later, and encourages biological activity. Ta-da! The sponge effect! That gets really called the sponge effect. The water is slowed down and filtered. You guys know what bioremediation means? What's it mean to remedy something? You know, to fix it. Like a remedio is a medicine to fix an illness. To remedy, to fix. Bioremediation means you use living stuff to fix a problem. That's a vocab term. It's underlined. You got to know it. Bioremediation is to use living stuff to fix a problem, remove the pollution from the water.
So it already happens by itself.
Yep. Wetlands will give you cleaner water. They prevent flooding because the water drains more slowly. So if you live downstream of a wetland, that wetland is going to keep you from suffering floods. I know I'm moving quickly today, and I actually have to speed up. But are there any parts that I can clarify about this? Nursery effect, because the babies like to, and the fish like to leave their stuff, and the birds like to catch the fish, and all that stuff. Bioremediation, sponge effect. For humans, this is a really valuable biome. It's near water, obviously. And it's a great place to grow your food because there's nutrient-rich soil and water, obviously. So in California, almost all of our wetlands are now farms. About 90% of California's wetlands have been made into farms. The same productivity that's great for biodiversity is great for us. We use that water and those nutrients and that great dirt. So this is a very critically endangered biome. There's not a lot left. And like I told you, I'm going to put this on the website. I won't be able to finish the aquatic biomes today. I'm only going to talk about a few of them, and I'm going to have to move really quickly, so get ready to scramble. There's an awesome map in the back. If you ever get a chance, you should walk back there and check it out. It shows you what happens if you map the Earth and then erase the land. I hate my laser pointer. I hate my laser pointer. I hate my laser pointer.
I'm going to bring you one.
I sure hope so.
I have one that I don't use.
There. That map, right here, that map,
Oh, I see it.
next to the ladder. Some of you can't see the thing of the ladder. So I'm sorry the ladder's in the way. Jack's about to move that ladder right now. That ladder, yes please. Maybe just to the left of the aquarium, please. This is what the planet would look like if you remove all the land. That's the circulatory system of the Earth. You ever seen those drawings of a human body where you remove all the meat, it's just the circulatory parts?
Yeah.
Well, that's your freshwater circulatory system. This is what moves things through terrestrial ecosystems. Biodiversity travels up rivers, and all the water flow and nutrient flow travel down rivers. Remember that at the top the water moves quickly, carrying big stuff like your mom. At the bottom the water slows down and deposits. So rivers break up the high elevation and make that into low elevation stuff. And really one thing that I really need to emphasize at this point is just like you are all special and unique little individual snowflakes that are magical in your own special ways, rivers are also unique and special. They're each different. So no river is alike. Some are colder, some are hotter, some are muddy, some are clear, some are forested, some are grassy, some are in the snow, some of them are down in the mud, some of them are broad open deltas, and they're all different. This is a vocab term that we added in this unit. If you didn't define it before, this would be the right time. Estuaries are where fresh water meets the sea, like the slough in Goleta Beach, like the big lagoon at UCS Bro, like the Devereaux Slough, where Sands is, if you guys surf or go to that golf course.
Are those like around UCSB, those sloughs, are those like not good to swim in? Like for instance, if they're emptying out in the ocean, is that unhealthy?
You know, there are times when estuaries get really funky. Because, like when the first rain hits today, a dog who pooped in May, like, that dog poop is still in the hills. Plus every dog that pooped in June, and every dog that pooped in July, and every dog that pooped in August, and every dog that pooped in September, and all the dogs that have pooped so far in October, all that dog poop will be carried into the rivers this afternoon. So you go surf tomorrow, and you got 6 months of dog crap in your nostrils. At times, estuaries are funky. And everybody knows, if you're a local, you know, you cannot surf the pit first storm of the year unless you're willing to get a sore throat and an ear infection. Like, I mean, have people experienced this phenomenon, surfing the pit? Because I sure have. Like, that water gets foul, like dangerously nasty. Yeah. Then again, on the flip side, all that biological activity and bioremediation and productivity, that dog poop will break down faster in an estuary than almost anywhere else. So it's both a filter, and it filters for the same reason that it aggregates. So yes, that's where all the pollution piles up. But if you let biology do its thing and are just patient a little bit, it's also some of the cleanest water because of the biological activity there. I mean, you'll notice that Mesa Lane's a great place to go look for lobsters, and you can get halibut out there, and there's great diving, there's a huge kelp bed, and they come together. You know, the nutrient flow that's left over after you've broken up that dog poop into basic fertilizer is good. The bacteria that rides the dog poop might be dangerous for a little while. So estuaries are both. They're really clean and really dirty sometimes. Remember, estuary is where fresh water meets the ocean. These are extremely variable environments. I mean, imagine, when all this rainwater comes out tomorrow, estuary will be mostly fresh water, very muddy, pretty cold. But yesterday, this morning, that estuary was still mostly salt water from high tide filling it in. The water had settled, it probably warmed up in the sunlight. So you get, at high tide, salty cold. At low tide, fresh and warm. In storms, they get really murky. In periods of still weather, they get really clear. So these are really, really, really dynamic. Estuaries go from clear to muddy. Don't forget those birds love estuaries because they go to eat all the fish that were left by this guy. The fishy rushes in, lays its eggs. The little fishies hide in the roots and eat all the bugs, and the big birds show up to eat the fish. I also want to talk about the intertidal zone. You know the intertidal. Think of a tide pool. Intertidal is between high tide and low tide. It's the amount of land that is covered up at high tide and exposed by low tide. Like in between, tidal, like between the tides. And if you think about it, there's sun, there's water, there's wave activity, there's crabs and seagulls, there's rocks. That's pretty close to like a biological food disposal. I mean, if a whale washes up on a sandy beach, it'll just sit there and rot, and it's gross and nasty. But if a whale washes up on like a rocky beach with big waves, it's a food disposal. The whale will get like battered by wave action and rocks and seagulls and crabs, and it'll turn into whale butter pretty quick. So the hot, cold, productive, wet, dry, salt makes it like a really tough place to live. If you're going to reproduce, you got to send your babies out to the sea. But I want you to do this. Think of the intertidal as topsoil. It's just like the mulch on top of the forest floor. Decomposition and nutrient cycling, breakdown of macromolecules into simpler nutrients. All that decomposition and biological activity. Very big deal. The intertidal is kind of what feeds the ocean. Because almost everything that goes into the ocean has to be digested by the tide line. I mean, think about a whale getting smashed up on here. Open ocean is a big, scary environment where everything swims really, really, really fast. The open ocean always scares the F out of me because everybody can see you and you have no place to hide and no place to run. So you can imagine, you can either dip into the dark or you can run faster than the other guy. We like this because we eat stuff that swims fast. A lot of muscle means a lot of meat. We like tuna. And tuna is found here. The bottom of the ocean is the least understood and most mysterious thing. We know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the bottom of the ocean. We have better maps of Mars than we have maps of the bottom of the ocean. We think that science has described somewhere under 10% of benthic species. So probably about 90 or more percent of the species down there we still don't know. Yeah.
Didn't James Cameron go along the ocean?
He actually went really, really deep. I believe he holds one of the depth records. I think he got to the lip of the Marianas Trench or
Did
something.
he do any like scientific research on it?
You'd have to ask Mr. Cam. I'm not a fan of fame, so usually I just avoid news about single. They call it snow. The little leftovers that are pooped and then pooped and then pooped and then pooped by fish. You guys know that when you poop on the surface of the ocean, that'll probably be re-eaten and re-pooped about a dozen times before it reaches the bottom. It's called snow, which is all the little miscellany that's left after biotic activity reaches the bottom. And there's weird stuff down there. Really weird stuff.
No.
That we don't have to talk about because we're almost done. Upwellings you really got to know about. It's come up a few times. It's just like a wetland. You get all the nutrients and all the sunlight and all the heat. Just like a wetland. But it happens at the surface of the ocean, so you've got all that biological potential in the middle of the ocean somewhere, or at least on the coastline somewhere.
So it happens on coastlines up to the top of the ocean.
Yep, like this. You remember I told you offshore wind draws up the cold to the surface, and I even tested you about this recently.
Yeah.
And check me out. Hypothermal vents are the only things that are based on something other than sunlight, and we're done.
Sulfur, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the hypothermal vents.
They're the
Because
only
they use
organisms
sulfur compounds.
you don't use photosynthesis.
Chemotrophic instead of.
Like everything down there, all the animals eat something that made its food outside.
You know, but where does the stuff come from?
Stuff above the ocean, dude.
So it's still fixed sunlight. Just digestion, digestion.
That. I would not want to go to the bottom of the ocean. Wait, what did you say? You stay away from fanes? Is that what you said? You don't like fanes?
I mean, when I hear that another rich famous person did something amazing, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't even read the news about that.
Well, he went down there because he wanted the footage for Titanic, right?
No, it was after Titanic.
Oh.
Because he was in the building.
But he did find Titanic earlier, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't.
Actually, I'm not sure that he personally found it.
Oh. But he got like a lot of footage, I think.
I think that he invested in the people who were looking for it because he knows that he finds killer footage for a movie.
Yeah.
I don't want to be famous, but I'm okay with being rich.
I would not.
Yeah. I'd be okay with that. I can go to the bottom of the ocean. Look at that place.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would all like to be rich.
Being known for something isn't like a not like that's something I admire.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, fame is great.
I don't want to be fame like tabloid fame, but being known for something good is like good.
Yeah, I mean,
Darwin.
Darwin's famous.
right.
Like leaving your footprint on.
Oh, totally, man. And I'm just kind of like skeptical about people who like buy their way to glory.
Sure.
Like.
But a lot of people get that rich, like,
through glory.
Through
Yeah,
glory,
exactly. Exactly. You know, whenever I think about whether or not I want to be rich, I always wonder, like...
You seem like you live a pretty rich life.
I think I am rich. It's a
Yeah.
different kind of rich. Like,
You live a pretty good life. Like, you live a much more, like rounded and, like, experienced life than my family is. Like,
bingo!
this has to do with money, yeah.
That's right. And so I kind of feel like I wouldn't mind being rich, but I don't pursue wealth.
It's just like being comfortable enough to not worry about it is nice. Like that's like that.
Yeah, but you know, you meet a lot of poor people that worry less than a lot of rich people. And the more shit you have, the harder you got to work to keep it.
Yeah.
You know,
There's like during the droughts, like the rich people in California that really wanted that. And like our house has some too, like that nice like English grass. Like if you don't water it like really frequently, it just looks crappy. But like everyone in California that has money wants that when that's like supposed to be in like England where it rains all the time. And so it's just kind of funny, and like, yeah, our family has a small plot of that, that normal grass, and it just takes so much water to keep it up.
We're going to do an
It
assignment in
doesn't
this
fit
class.
here, right?
It doesn't. We're going to do an assignment in this class where I ask students to look at their family's water bill. And you might notice some students who have like astronomical water consumption because of irrigation.
I like what you were saying. Have you ever watched your butler do the dishes?
I mean, kids don't do these.
Sure. It's going to be to a Mad Academy class, maybe you're like,
No. I'll probably get fired for that.
no. And I don't think people even got it.
No.
Did you get your animal?
Yeah, no,
What are you doing? What animal are you doing?
South American fruit fly. Oh, or a California. Yeah.
So what about if you're not California missing?
See what's up.
Probably.
It's whatever.
What? Pen.
You keep this one. That's your bus ticket. What fuck do I turn into you? No. I'll show you in a minute.
Alright, sounds good, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you want midline fish? Yeah. And Marilyn got the same one. So I'm going to tell her. But you should know that there was a conflict with but you were first. That's your bus ticket. You need it by the day you don't bus.
Hey, Jose. I got this thing. Only thing is, so because my family and my insurance,